For more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
You'll forgive me if I'm just a tad looking something up. I think the Bombers are playing a little bit of subterfuge. They came out with their depth chart for tomorrow's Grey Cup. And listed as game time decisions are both Adam Bighill and Dalton Schoen. But something tells me that it's unlikely either of those guys are going to be able to suit up tomorrow in the Grey Cup when the Bombers and the Alouettes take the field. But it is worth noting that they are listed on the depth chart, both of them, as game time decisions for tomorrow's Grey Cup between the Bombers and the Owls. So there's your Bomber update. I'm sure we'll touch on that throughout the course of the next couple of hours. We say good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all those joining us live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple hours. We're going to touch on the Jets. We're going to touch on the Bombers, I'm sure, as well. We'll touch on this, that, and everything, looking back at last night's Jets victory and getting you set for tonight's Jets-Coyotes game. The Jets homestand wraps up. The Jets have an opportunity to certainly make it an even more successful one, put some distance between themselves and the Coyotes as the Coyotes sit 2 points behind the Jets entering tonight's contest. Gentlemen, good to see you both. It's been a whopping 11 hours since we last got together, but nonetheless, it is nice to see you on this Saturday morning.
Likewise, boys. What's happening? Yeah, busy weekend with the Jets games and the Bombers and Alouettes in the Grey Cup. First time ever we've seen that matchup because, of course, those two teams are in the East. So, yeah, it's exciting. And, you know, we broke all the goals down on last night's postgame show. That was maybe the ugliest win of the season for the Jets. But, you know, it's a win. It's 2 points. And even though the Sabres made a good push there, Hellebuck had to make some key saves. So, you know, we talked about it. You know, 9 of 11 games the Jets have gained at least a point, and you know they're staying right up there with Colorado and Dallas. Dallas has pulled away a little bit, but that's what you got to do. Dave always talks about, you know, at this point in the season, as we're leading up to American Thanksgiving, right? Just keep getting those points, and obviously, you know, Laurent Brossoit is going to get the start tonight. Mm-hmm. And the Coyotes have proven to be actually a pretty good matchup for the Jets. They're not really a pushover anymore, boys.
No, they certainly aren't. They've got some talent. 8-6-2. The Coyotes are, you know, a +7 goal differential, but the Jets, Dave, know that they can beat the Coyotes. I mean, obviously, I don't think they ever thought that they couldn't, but they did beat them a couple weeks ago, as we touched on 2 weeks ago Saturday, or 2 weeks ago today in Tempe, in front of the capacity crowd at Mullet Arena. The Jets defeated the Arizona Coyotes on that Saturday afternoon contest, so they do have that in their back pocket that they can use maybe as motivation or use as whatever they want to use it as. I'm not even sure if they'd use it for anything other than knowing that probably last night's game wasn't their best effort and not the way that they want to play if they want to be successful, you know, game in, game out. At the same time, though, it was nice to see from the Jets' perspective, sort of Connor Hellebuck return to form as he's not been Hellebuckian so far this season, more or less.
Yeah, you stole it out of my lips, Drew. It was definitely a Hellebuckian type of performance, with the exception of probably 6 minutes in that second period. But associate coach Scott Arniel didn't make any bones about it, right? He was clear that their effort wasn't good enough, and that the Sabres were very good in that game. Mm-hmm. And the Sabres, you know, did a lot of things that the Jets weren't able to prevent. So, I mean, it was pretty obvious if you listen to that availability, which of course was available on our YouTube channel, was that he was clearly not happy with the overall game that his team played. But again, he'll take those 2 points and he'll run with it. And a little bit of Palace intrigue this morning with the Moose heading to Toronto to take on the Marlies this afternoon. The Jets made an emergency recall, folks haven't heard that yet, of Dominic Toninato. So they are holding, I was told, a very limited optional morning skate because it is a home and home. So the Jets some Jets may take the ice at 10:30 this morning. And we know that associate coach Scott Arniel will be speaking sometime around 10:30, depending on how heavily optional it is. And then, or attended, I should say, sorry. And if, so he'll speak probably just before the end of our show at some point, and we'll get some sort of indication as to why they've recalled Dominic Toninato, whether it's for injury, whether it's due to play. So we'll find that out sometime, hopefully before the end of this broadcast.
Tony Nato played for the Moose last night in Belleville. Is that right?
He did. He had an assist in the win. He had a nice screen, which led to a goal. So, he had a good rebound game, as I discussed last night, as did most of the Moose.
It will be interesting. I wonder, yeah. So, I mean, clearly you would think somebody is banged up. Whether or not they're banged up enough that they have to be out of the lineup for tonight's game, we'll find out, either this morning or right before puck drop at 6:00 this evening. But this Winnipeg Jets team going through a little bit of an injury bug right now. We talked about, we sort of glossed over it, but I think it probably deserves a couple minutes worth of conversation. The injury to Rasmus Kupari. So, he's out 5 to 7 weeks. It happened on Tuesday night. He goes into the boards, and Dave M proved to be the doctor in the press box, saying that it was his shoulder, where others thought it was a wrist or whatever
clavicle,
other people said. But it's not obviously the most significant injury, but it definitely does cut into the depth, and the depth that the Jets had in their forward group particularly was one of their strong suits and one of their assets so far this year. And then all of a sudden, if Kupari's out of the lineup, and we know that Velarde's out of the lineup still, all of a sudden you begin to sort of chip away at that depth. Now, injuries are going to happen in the course of the season, no matter what. No one's ever going to stay healthy and play the same 12 forwards, 82 games. But it does begin to impact the Jets' depth, and it impacts the sort of the ability for the Jets to roll those four lines like we saw so often early this year, Ezzy.
Yeah, you're right. And the good news is that, Velarde is close, right? We don't know exactly when he's going to be back, but I think it's safe to say he'll be back in the next couple weeks, right, Dave, based on what we've been told. I think it's fair to say. So he's getting very close, which is right around the timeline for his injury, right, which I believe was 4 to 6 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, Rasmus Kupari has fit in nicely, Drew, on the fourth line. I think he only had the one assist. And if I'm not mistaken, he hasn't scored a goal yet this year. But, he's had a lot of scoring chances. And I think what stood out is how versatile he is. And I think a lot of people didn't realize how big he is. But I think, he's been a
fast he is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, the Jets, look, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby I thought was good last night. I think, he's perfectly fine in a fourth line wing role. We know David Gustafsson, he can play up the middle. And Dave mentioned Dominic Toninato. If he needs to come in, I mean, my best guess, guys, would be that you go with the exact same lineup. Maybe Nate Schmidt goes in for Logan Stanley. I don't think you're going to see necessarily Toninato go in for Jonsson-Fjällby. That and it's because, like I said, I mean, he did exactly what you expect out of him, right? Like aggressive forechecker. He's got the speed. You just want like a good 7 to 10 minutes out of Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, where
8.5 last night, 3 hits. I mean, exactly, no, I mean, he doesn't bring any offense to the game to speak of. I've used this line before, but whomever said, does his game change if he has a stick or if he doesn't have a stick, is probably fairly accurate. But
you say that, but he had 6 goals and 14 points in 50 games last year. Like, right. That's not nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Drew. I mean, I don't think anybody's expecting Jonsson-Fjällby to score a hat trick tonight versus Arizona. But he actually does have, he's a crash and banger. I think you guys would agree that, he's a guy that, at the NHL level, his ceiling probably is the fourth line, but good for him, right? He signed the 2-year deal after he became I think he was an RFA, right? And I believe his contract next year is one way, right, Dave?
Sorry, I think he was a UFA, is he?
Sorry, he was a UFA, but his contract is one way next year, if I'm not mistaken. His contract is two-way this year and one way next year. But the point is, I think he's a valuable guy. And Drew's
right. You are right about that, Ezzy. Yeah, you are.
Yeah,
right
so I just remember that from the summer. But yeah, you don't have Gabe Velarde and you don't have Rasmus Kupari. So Alex Iafallo is the only remaining LA King, if you want to say that, right? So it's going to affect the depth. But when you have 3 lines going, and that's what we talked about. Scheifele's line, obviously, is your top offensive line. Lowry, Niederreiter, and Appleton, they've been good the whole year. And now Ehlers, Perfetti, Nemestikov is arguably playing their best hockey of the year, right? So it'll affect your depth, but Velarde's coming back, so I don't think you're that concerned.
No, you're not that concerned that it's, that the sky is falling or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, but it is going to eventually whittle away your depth, and it'd be interesting. I mean, again, we don't know I mean, I don't remember anybody sort of looking banged up last night during the game. So we don't know who Tony Nato is been recalled for, if it's somebody specific or if it's just precautionary. You wondered the Jets maybe consider going 11-7 like they did on Tuesday night. With Nate Schmidt out of the lineup yesterday, Logan Stanley, the 11-7, which I typically don't love. It was okay on Tuesday. It was okay on Tuesday night, and the second half of a back-to-back. Now, maybe that might be a little bit too stressful on the forward group, having to play 2 in a row and now doing a one-man short. But you do wonder if that becomes a consideration for the coaching staff of the Jets tonight entering the game. Again, this is all with the caveat and the comment that we don't know why Tony Nato has been recalled. We don't know who's suffering from what.
We also don't fully know why David Gustafson took the game day, the pregame skate, like Dave said. I mean, I know we were told, I think, that he was just a healthy scratch, but that's kind of weird that he would take the skate. So, if I had to play the speculation station game, Dave, I would say it might be Gustafson who's dealing with something.
I think that's a good way of looking at it, and I agree with you. Like, I thought it was a little curious. Like, if you knew you were going with Logan Stanley, you knew you were going 11-7. I guess the only way you potentially keep David Gustafson in, if it's not Gustafson, perhaps whichever other forward it had been as, maybe that person was dealing with something, and so you have Gustafson warm up in case that person can't go, and you just scratch them. So, look, it's clearly, we'll find out hopefully within an hour and a half, and we'll be able to share it with everyone here. But regardless, the reality is for the Jets is that they'll have Dominic Toninato, and they'll have that one. Because remember, guys, they've been running lean, right? Like, they have the exact number of forwards to play a game. They didn't have anybody extra, so now they'll have that one extra body potentially. We don't know, again, if there was an injury. But again, that's the whole point of when you're running a team leanly like that and accruing cap space the way the Jets have been, that they're sitting there going, okay, well, you might have a situation where the Moose aren't in town. Now, again, I suspect that if someone was banged up before the Moose had left, they probably would have made that recall to some significant degree. They didn't, obviously.
Did Toninato play yesterday for the Moose?
He did.
Or was he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, he played.
So he was on the road.
Yeah. No, he was on the road. So he had an assist in the win. And like I said, he played a decent game. I mean, again, from what I saw, I didn't watch, obviously, the whole game because I was watching the Jets game at the same time. But I mean, like I said, we'll see what happens with Toninato, but and if he comes in or if it's just potentially it's just insurance. I mean, Scott Arniel, when he was asked about going 11-7 by Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press on Friday, it was either Thursday or Friday, but I think it was Friday. He didn't love the idea, didn't love it. And Drew's right. I think going back to back and the forwards enjoy it because they get more ice time. But, that's having just played a game last night. So I suspect you don't want to be overly taxing of your team because, you can run into injuries that way. So we'll see what happens with the Jets. Maybe it's
I hate to agree with Drew here, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 7-11. I'm not saying that I like 7-11. Honestly, like I'm
Andy,
not.
We know you love 7-11.
Yeah, I was going to say you're just saying that intentionally.
I wasn't trying to be funny there. I was trying to say, like, we would have to get somebody with tons of coaching experience to really, talk about the pros and the cons of, 7-11 versus 6-12, right? Because 6 defensemen, 12 forwards is the standard, right? That's what most NHL teams, most hockey teams in any level, at any level, are playing, right? But just because of as Drew mentioned, second game of a back-to-back, David Gustafson or another forward could be a little bit banged up. Plus, I mean, Logan Stanley and Nate Schmidt right now, nobody really seems to have hold of that number 6 defenseman spot, right? So I'm not saying that, I'm not going to give a Ginsburg guarantee here and say that it's going to be 7-11. I'm just saying I won't be surprised. Whereas the Jets-Devils game, I think that caught us by surprise, right? Because we just thought Gustafson was going to play, Dave. And then Logan Stanley comes in, right? And then you go, so it was just a little bit surprising there, but we'll see what happens. I think, the Jets have options. And, when you have guys like Toninato and Janssen Fjällby, you're not worried about those guys coming into the lineup. Those are pro players, and especially Toninato, right? Like, he's a guy that, I mean, the Jets organization is very familiar with. So again, it just shows you how good this Jets forward depth is, because we're not even talking about, maybe calling up a Brad Lambert or, another forward, right? I'm not saying that it should be Lambert, but I mean, he is always an option with how well he's playing down with the Moose, right, Dave?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, me personally, and my opinion would say no, just because they're playing him at center and they don't want to stagnate his development. So you're not going to pull him up and do what they did with Rozovic which is say he's going to be a center and then put him on the wing. I mean, obviously, if you need a center, but I just don't know that they're wanting to rush him. I don't say I would be of the opinion you may see Brad Lambert this year in a Jets uniform, but it'll be towards the end of the season, more as a reward for good play with the Moose, because right now he's trying. You're trying your best with like the Luciuses and the Chibrakovs and the Lamberts to let them develop. And if you need guys to come up and play in a different role, then it's going to be the Axel Jonsson-Fjällbys and the Dominic Toninatos and the Jeffrey VLs and that sort of thing over any of these young prospects. I could be wrong, but I'd be more inclined to think that along those terms.
You know, I thought last night, you know, that David Gustafsson really, I thought he had an impressive showing last night. You know, granted, you know, he's playing, you know, just under 10 minutes last night, 9:36. But in the third period, particularly when the Jets were struggling, I thought he was one of the Jets players that sort of stood out to me as trying to drag the team through the doldrums that they were in. If I recall correctly, there was a good, strong net drive against Eric Comrie. I think that was the one where Comrie's mask was knocked off in the sequence. I think that was Gustafsson who drove that net there. And there were a couple times where he just looked like a sort of a bigger player. He was playing bigger than we're used to necessarily thinking him as. And he's not small by any stretch, but of course he's been sort of slight up to this point of his career, but it seems like he's sort of.
Are you saying that David Gustafsson is bulked up on creatine? Like, what are you saying here, Drew?
No, I'm not saying that he's bulked up on creatine, because that would be a very poor decision on his part. But I think that he's growing into his body, into his size, and is now able to use, you know, his size and the leverage that comes with that in a better manner than we've seen him doing before in his career. When yes, you were tall, but you didn't necessarily have the width to go along with the height, as opposed to me, who doesn't have the height to go along with the width. That's my problem, you see.
Well done.
That's funny. That was well done. Yeah, look, I think it was tough for Gus Bus to be a healthy scratch. So we always talk about this, right? Like, Gabe Vilardi goes down. What does that mean? It's an opportunity for somebody else. Rasmus Kupari goes down. Who gets the opportunity? Axel Jonsson-Fjällby gets the opportunity, right? And we talked about it. Vilardi, we expect to be back, you know, sometime in the next couple of weeks. I don't think anybody's expecting him, Dave, to play in those Florida games against the Lightning and the Panthers. He might be on the road, but I don't think anybody expects him to play. I think that would be a little bit too soon, but you're probably talking about the week after next week. But yeah, I think, you know, to your point, Drew, about Gustafsson, I mean, look, Dave, I will always give him credit, was the originator of the Gus Bus, not necessarily the nickname, but Dave has been, you know, singing his praises, you know, since he turned pro. So I mean, he's a smart player. And I mean, I think we could debate, you know, what his ceiling would be at the NHL level. I mean, it could be a third line center, a third line winger, but that's not a bad ceiling, right? And I think, you know, what always stands out is, you know, he's such a smart player. I realized that was thrown out a lot on last night's broadcast when talking about Cole Perfetti. I think Kevin Sawyer called him a thinker at least 5 times. I'd also like to be called a thinker. That's not necessarily the worst thing to be called. I've been called worse, Drew. You know that.
You'd settle for that one time.
Yeah, exactly. Just for someone to acknowledge that I'm thinking would be nice, right? But yeah, Gustafsson's a great player, and that's the thing, guys. Like, that speaks to the depth. Last year, David Gustafsson was a regular in the Jets lineup. Obviously, you know, with the injuries, he didn't play every single game. But this year, I mean, he's the 13th forward, and Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, same thing. Axel Jonsson-Fjällby played 50 games last year. So yeah, I think, you know, Gustafsson has been playing well since coming into the lineup for Gabe Vilardi, and he's already got 2 goals, and you know, he's going to get more. But yeah, I think once Vilardi comes back, he might be the odd man out when Kupari comes back too.
You know,
I was just going to say, Drew, I was simply going to add to Ezzy's point is that it is interesting. I mean, it's that whole idea of the depth that this Jets organization has, that you're scratching your head. Okay, Gabe Vilardi, who is, as I said, the next guy to return from injury. It's still not still a couple of weeks away, but is the next person to return. And you're like, well, what do? Right? Do you put him in his old spot and move Alex Iafallo? If you do, where do you move Alex Iafallo? You finally got that second line humming along and producing, and you've got the third line humming along, and you throw Alex Iafallo from the first line to the fourth line. Do you put Gabe Vilardi at center instead of Vlad Nemesnikov? Well, I don't know. I mean, Vlad Nemesnikov seems to have gotten Cole Perfetti going. Do you really want to, you know, arrest that sort of progress from the 2020 first round?
I don't think anybody wants to be arrested, Dave.
Well, you never know, Ed. Drew likes having cuffs slapped on his wrist. So anywho,
wow.
but I'm bump ching. So the point is that,
Yeah, but
you know,
there was no prison anywhere around there.
thank you, Ezra.
And those cups were fuzzy.
God, please. It's too early in the morning and we have the intern in the chat. Let's keep this PC. So anyways, the point is that it's an interesting perspective. It's an interesting problem for the Jets to have, is that you have that depth now that before you'd be panicking. You'd put a player in to kind of fix the hole, and then that would be your permanent solution. It's like my parents with electrical work. Somehow electrical cords replace actually getting the electricity fixed in that sort of thing. It becomes what we call a Minuk temporary solution is generally a permanent solution. But for the Jets right now, what they
Sounds like
have
a
is
fire hazard, if you ask me.
most likely. But the point is that you end up having in the situation currently, you have a problem in quotes for the people listening on the podcast, that you have a lot of talent and you're going to have some problems now because your first three lines appear to be going. And that's a good thing for the Winnipeg Jets.
And Philip Smithson was asking about the third line. Like, that's probably the one line I don't think you see really touched, right? Like, obviously, you know, Lowry and Niederreiter and Appleton have been fantastic together, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of with Drew there. Like, I think you keep Scheifele, Connor, and Iafallo together, and I guess that means Nemesnikov gets bumped down to the fourth line, which is crazy. But I like the idea of either Perfetti in the middle with Velarde and Ehlers, or Velarde in the middle with Perfetti and Ehlers. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, again, these are great problems to have. The Jets have their best forward depth that they've had since that 2017-18 season. So I think, Dave, part of it is just you don't want to disrupt a line that's going really well. To your point, Nemesnikov has been really good up the middle, but I mean, Gabe Velarde has to be in your top six, right?
Oh, I mean, I think that's a non-starter. Of course, he has to be in your top six. I mean, you know, it is a conundrum because, you know, Connor, Scheifele, and Iafallo have been good. They've been, you know, they haven't had over 50% possession together, but they've been pretty good. I would argue. I don't think anybody's really particularly upset with how they've played together, but Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde were so dominant. Now, albeit it was in 24 minutes of ice time at 5-on-5. So it was in such a small sample size, it's hard to tell for sure, but they had almost 74% of the possession. So if you can, you know,
I do think, by the way,
going,
that will be the line that you know, Rick Bowness and or Scott Arniel goes to. I'm just
you
saying
think
that I
he goes
personally
right
would
back
like
to it.
Probably at some point. I don't know if, you know, Velarde comes back and they go right back to it. But like you said, Drew, in what was it, game 2 or game 3 that Velarde got injured, right? So it was two or three games, but you're right. I mean, Velarde did seem like a really nice fit. And so that means probably that you go Iafallo, Ehlers, Perfetti, right? But again, that's kind of a bit of a conundrum, right? To Dave's point, because, you know, is Nemesnikov back to your fourth line? I mean, if Nemesnikov is on your fourth line, there's no problem with that. But you almost wonder if you're kind of not using him to his maximum capacity, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I would say that the difference is that, and you're right, Az, but I think it just goes to show you that you can now have 4 scoring lines. So as long as you're rolling out the lines with an effectiveness and an equalness, not necessarily absolutely equal, but at least you're giving them a little bit more than what we've seen in the past and allowing them to do something. And again, we've talked about the fourth line, whichever the ever iteration of it there is, because I think all of those players can create that similar sort of identity. So whether it's Vlad Nemesnikov or David Gustafsson or Morgan Barron or, you know, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby or Rasmus Kupari, I think there is that you have that ability to say, wow, you actually have an effective fourth line that can contribute to this team. So that's an important thing. We've talked about it, Ezzy. How many years have we talked about this Jets club not having a fourth line that did much other than hold water? Well, now you've got a fourth line, again, however it is comprised, but at least this way you've got something that can actually be thrown out there and potentially produce, not just stay at a neutral number and not allow goals to be scored against it, but can actually produce goals for your team.
And I think it's worth noting that coaches, you know, when presented with opportunities or presented with the challenges of making changes to your lineup because of players returning from injury, are usually going to err on the side of making as few changes as possible. Meaning, I don't know that they would necessarily want to start shuffling around all, you know, 3 out of the 4 lines all on the same game. Right. So Velarde comes back. I'd be surprised if all of a sudden you'd see a domino effect that is more than just sort of the bare minimum. meaning, let's say Velarde comes back, Iafallo would move to let's say for argument's sake, to the fourth line and bump Alex Janssen-Fialbi. I don't think that necessarily coaches want to start putting Velarde back up with Scheifele and Connor and then moving Iafallo to, the second line or the third line, and then the second line going to the fourth line. I think they generally want to err on the side of making as few changes per game as possible, especially when things are going well, as they have been for the Jets. Now, if they all of a sudden start to struggle and they're in a bit of a losing streak, well, then the blender can be, blended for a little while longer, and the ice cubes can be, chopped up even finer than necessarily they would be if the things are going well with the team. So that's also,
Spency makes a good point too. I mean, like Lowry obviously is going to always center, the third line, or some people are calling it the second line based on usage, right? But I think, the way Niederreiter has played with those two, I just, I'm with you, Drew. I kind of lean towards, Velarde either going back with Scheifele and Connor, or you keep Iafallo up there and Velarde takes Nemesnikov's place on the second line. And again, there's balance there, right? We put up the comment by Rob Somerville. If you've got players like Vlad Nemesnikov and Morgan Barron and David Gustafsson, you can play that fourth line, 10 or 11 minutes, even 12 minutes if you want to, because those guys have a higher ceiling. As we lose Dave Minuk, they have a higher ceiling than, the Jets would have had last year. Dave M is back here. Good to have you back, Dave. Not sure what happened there.
I think you're stealing all the bandwidth, Ezzy. So all of a sudden I was freezing.
Even with your head on fire, that's hard to believe.
I might have to turn my head off fire because I think that's sucking up all the bandwidth as well.
Sorry, Dave. I was downloading season 3 of Succession.
I thought it was CSI, but all good.
It's a good show, Ezzy. You'll enjoy it. Maybe wait till after the show's over before you fully enjoy it. Quick update. I know people have been asking about Rutger McGroarty, who left the game last night with Michigan, left on a stretcher and was taken to hospital. No update is the update. So we haven't seen any word come across the wire so far regarding his status. Obviously, not a great situation there with the University of Michigan and the Jets' former first-round pick. So we will see. If there is any updates, we will give them to you in the course of this morning's broadcast, or later on, of course, on illegalcurve.com. When we come back, making his debut on the show, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure he is, Christian Amel from CJOB Radio is going to join us next for more Jets talk. It's a Saturday morning, the Jets and the Coyotes later tonight, but right now it's the Jets, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Drew, Dave, and Ezzy. Don't go anywhere. We're live on our YouTube channel. The clock ticks past the bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. Reminder, later tonight, the Jets and the Coyotes, also known as the Coyotes. That's going to be a 6 o'clock puck drop, which means post-game 8:45 back here on our YouTube channel. We're thrilled to welcome to the program, making his debut here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show from CJOB, Christian Amel joins us.
Dr. Evil.
I was going to say, is that a stuffed pet or is that a real pet? What do we have there?
It's a Sully. He says hi.
Sully.
Yeah, he'll probably make a scene at some point here, but right now he's being nice.
Okay, well, we love pets on this show, so basically it's a rule. If you have an animal in your house, you have to bring it onto the show to join the three of us.
Well, hence the reason why Ezzy's on the show in my house right now.
That's right. Charitably been called animals many times before. So,
well, Christian, Jason Bell, sports editor of the Free Press, when he comes on, he has his bird on his shoulder, and the bird's name is Marty Bird, which is incredible. But now we have Sully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have Christian with Sully. So now we have a couple of guests that will always come on with their pets.
Yeah, I can't guarantee that the next time you have me on, he'll be this cool, but we'll see how the hour goes. And there's dogs in the house too. They'll probably say something at some point. But right now, Sully's being a good boy.
Well, there you go. It sounds like you got a whole barnyard going on over there, Christian. Anyways, we're thrilled that you're able to join us this morning. Big weekend, of course, for you folks over at CJOB. You got a Jets game tonight. You got a Bomber game tomorrow. It's going to be a fun one, nonetheless, for the news and information leader here in Winnipeg on CJOB 680. Christian, obviously, to start with the Jets. We'll probably touch on the Bombers at some point as well. You know, we sit here and we're somehow almost at the quarter mark of the season. By the time next weekend rolls around, the Jets will have played Now, let me do some quick math. 19 games in this season, so pretty close to that quarter mark, as I mentioned. 9-5-2, very good start for the Jets. Everyone would say that they've been pleasantly surprised by their performance so far. From your perspective, it seemed the Jets seem to beat the teams that they beat, but yet are struggling maybe with those teams that are in that echelon a little bit above them. What's it going to take for the Jets to be able to move up into that next level, that next category where the Dallas Stars reside, and where they haven't played the Colorado Avalanche yet, but where the Avalanche are set to reside, or the Golden Knights? So how do the Jets move up one more notch?
Well, it's possible they don't, right? It's possible
Sure.
that this is just who they are. They're a team that's at the upper end of the middle class, I guess, where you've got Colorado, Dallas, Vegas. They lost to the Rangers. It was close, but New York's had a great start to this season. And we haven't seen them play Boston yet, but they might just be that team that beats most of the teams below them and can't quite get the teams above them. Potentially, if you're trying to map out the best case scenario for this team, I think it starts with special teams, right? Because the power play has been better. The penalty kill still isn't very good. They killed off 2 against Buffalo. Buffalo has one of the worst power plays in the league, so congrats. But Connor Hellebuck and Laurent Brossoit have had really bad numbers on the penalty kill, and I know Murat Atesh wrote about this at The Athletic. Is it the penalty kill bad because their save percentage is bad on the PK, or is their save percentage on the PK bad because the PK is bad, right? So if Hellebuck steps up on the PK, and if he plays like he did last night, right? I think we can agree he was the number one reason they won last night.
Mm-hmm.
If that is the kind of Hellebuck that they get, continuing with the health that they've had, with Velarde coming back soon, their continued strong run of play at 5-on-5, and if you can add strong special teams on top of that, well, now we're talking about a top tier league or team, I think, because that's really what's been holding it back. If you look at the underlying metrics, this team has been really good at even strength this season and not good at all on special teams. So if you add that part to their game, I think that we're looking at a team that, best of 7 maybe could compete with those teams. They might lose 2 of 3 or 3 of 4 during the regular season, but get into the playoffs if you have that kind of goaltending, that kind of run of play, and that kind of health, because really, right, a lot of teams have injuries, and the Jets have had really one major one so far. Rasmus Kupari's hurt, but it's a fourth liner that some people thought should be maybe taken out of the lineup anyway. So the Velarde injury, if he's coming back, if they can stay healthy, then yeah, this could be a team that's right up there in the Central and the West. So we'll see.
I would agree with that, Christian, and really the only team that you could say that might have an edge when it comes to goaltending is Dallas, right? With the way Jake Ottinger's playing, and even Scott Wedgwood, we just saw him. He's a very good backup. So I think Dallas arguably has the best 1-2 punch in the league. I mean, obviously we know Aiden Hill's pretty good with Logan Thompson, but I think to your point about the playoffs, I mean the Jets against most teams will have the edge in goal, and we expect the Jets to make some type of move before the deadline. I think it's going to be a defenseman. I think you guys would probably agree. Most people see that as being maybe a weakness. And I wanted to ask you, Christian, about the kind of 6D spot, right? Because Ville Heinola, he's still a few weeks away, at least a few weeks away. Nate Schmidt was a healthy scratch last night versus Buffalo. Logan Stanley starts for the second game in a row, and obviously we'll find out later today if it's going to be Nate Schmidt or Logan Stanley, or they could go 7-11. But overall, do you see kind of, that being the situation until Ville Heinola comes back, like basically a rotation of Nate Schmidt and Logan Stanley, and then maybe once Declan Chisholm gets called up, he gets a chance? Like, it seems like right now there's not really anybody, solidifying that spot on the third pair.
I wish Ville Heinola didn't get hurt in preseason, because this was finally going to be his chance, right? He was having a great camp. People have been pining for his opportunity, and he'd play a game or two here and there, but he'd never get a run, right? And that's what you need to see if someone, because look at even Cole Perfetti this year, another young player. First few games, not great, but he knows he's in the lineup, right? He's not coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing him just catch fire, and it's been awesome to see. But I think of the 3 that you've mentioned, of Schmidt, Stanley, and Heinola, I think we can agree at this point the ceiling is highest for Heinola, because Schmidt's just older, right? He's one of the oldest guys on the team, and his best days are behind him. No offense to him, but that's just the case. That's just true. Logan Stanley, I think he is going to be who he is. Big guy, physical, can shoot the puck hard, not the best defender, not the best skater, kind of stuck at a maybe third pairing, fourth pairing. I don't know what to do with him, but I think Heinola definitely has the high ceiling. And once he's healthy, I'd like to see him get in and give him some chances, because we're seeing now Stanley's played back-to-back games, haven't been overwhelmed by what he's done these 2 games, and Nate Schmidt's had a bit of a tough season so far, but I think there's value in trying out Heinola and maybe even Chisholm, right? I know there's concern about the back and forth with him in terms of waivers, or is he waiver exempt or no? I can't remember.
No, he's
No,
not.
Right. So
No.
they put him down on the conditioning stint
Right.
so they can avoid waivers. But that's a dangerous game you play, right? Because
And Dave would know. Sorry, Christian. Dave would know better, but I don't know. Is there a max to how many times you can do the conditioning stint? I'm not sure how many. I don't know if they can keep doing that with him.
I believe
It
it's
might
just
be-
once.
Yeah. So
I
like
could be
Christian,
wrong,
if
but I
they-
think it's just
if they
once.
once he's recalled, then waivers becomes an option. So that's why, there's that log jam where, like, do you consider moving a Logan Stanley because you don't want to lose Chisholm on waivers, right?
what do you get for Stanley though at this point?
Mid-round pick, best.
Yeah, if you're 5th, 6th, right? There's and because if you put him on waivers, you'll lose him for nothing. But you're not going to put him on waivers. There's going to be an attempt to get something.
You never look better.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, I think Handel is the guy. I'd like to see him in there. And then we've surplus of defensemen. What are you going to do about that to make space for Handel or potentially a Chisholm, right? Stanley, I'm not sure what value has. I'm not sure what value Schmidt has with his contract too, right? That's going to be a tough one too for Chevy.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, thrilled to be joined by Christian Amel from CJOB Radio, talking about the Jets, and of course, we'll touch on the Bombers ahead of the
Don't
Grey
forget
Cup
about
tomorrow.
Sully.
And
Sully's
Sully
there.
the cat. Yes. So
Yeah.
then what kind of dogs do you have?
Well, you saw briefly May made an appearance there. She was just in
Okay.
the corner. She is what we describe as, I don't know,
Yeah, I have one of those too.
Pitbull-ish, I guess, sort of. Then there's Noya, who's lab-ish. Again, it's another, I don't know, another rescue. And then Rosie is the queen of the house. She's a dachshund. So
3 dogs and a cat.
yes, we have.
Wow.
And there's a lizard downstairs too. So we have a bit of a zoo here. In,
That's a menagerie right there.
Manitoba here.
Christian, want to ask you about Kyle Connor. I mean, he's 5 weeks into the season. He is the co-leader with a number of other players with 13 goals, but quite the resurgence from him this season. What have you noticed anything different from him that we didn't see last year? Because last year, of course, was a down year for him, and he only scored 31. And this year, it's funny that a lot of the articles are saying, can Kyle Connor hit 50? I'm like, well, he's on pace for like 65 right now, so I don't know if I'd limit him to 50.
Yeah, the on pace fours are always fun in the first quarter of the season, right? Because it's, this guy's going to score 83 goals and have 215 points. But I think the number one thing for Kyle Connor, it's not really power play boosted either, but I think he has been able to find the quiet ice better. And I think he's just finishing better, right? His shooting percentage was pretty low for a lot of last season. That's partially luck, and that's partially the opportunities he's getting. I think Mark Scheifele as a passer this season is having a better campaign. Last year he was putting up goals, but like no assists, right? I think he's been able. I could just think of so many goals that Connor scored this year, where it's just like, oh my god, what a pass from Scheifele, and he buries it. I think they've been able to find some magic with Iafallo, this burst they've had over the last week and a half, and I just think that goal scorers will have runs, and it's not just limited to 10 or 15 games. It could be 82 games where you have a smaller sample size, and you had 2 years ago where he almost went 50 goals, 50 assists, comes back down, and now the shooting percentage numbers are going up again. So I think that's part of it too. But I think he's just playing with a lot of confidence. His shot is going in more than it wasn't before. I guess that's a very basic way of saying it. But I've just been impressed with where he's been able to get his looks from so far this year. And I think Scheifele kind of elevating his game as a passer has been a big part of that.
I mean, Christian, you mentioned Scheifele and the success, and Connor and Gabe Vilardi. We know he's set to come back in the next, let's say, for argument's sake, 2 weeks time. We were talking about that on the segment before you came back. Does where do you put Gabe Vilardi when he comes back? Do you put him right back where he was, where Scheifele and Connor had that tremendous success with him, albeit for a game plus, or do you maybe ease him into the lineup, in a bit of a different role than we saw when he was healthy and to start the season?
My gut says ease him in, but if you do that, what do you do with everyone else? Because I know the easy thought is, okay, we move Domestikov back to the fourth line where he started the season. He'll play with Barron and Gustafson. AJF goes back to the Moose, and maybe you put Velarde on the right wing with Perfetti and Ehlers. But that line has looked really good with Domestikov, Ehlers, and Perfetti. I feel like the fact that they've played together most of the season now has really elevated the game of first Perfetti, and now we're seeing Ehlers come along. And it's been a really impressive run of play from them. So I don't know what to do with Velarde, because they that top line in such limited action looked really solid. And so you just put it back to where it was before. And if you don't do that, well, then where does Iafallo go? Right? Because that third line, you don't want to move Niederreiter out of there. That line seems to be the most untouchable of the three. So I guess I don't have a good answer for you, because it's a good problem to have, having too many good guys on the team. But I guess Velarde on top line, you can't put Iafallo or Velarde on line 4. So I guess you have to move Domestikov out of there, and maybe Velarde plays center on that second line with Ehlers and Perfetti. It's tough. It's tough, right? And we'll see based on what the results are on the ice. Of course.
It's a good thing Scott Arniel and Rick Bowness are getting paid more than we are to come up with the answers to these problems.
You guys get paid?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, no, but and I'm sure, Christian, like, you guys have talked about it. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that you guys, you've talked
Everyone's
about it with
talking
Kelly
about
Moore.
it,
I think we've like talked about the fact that we're going to be talking about it, but we haven't quite talked about it yet, because he's still a little ways from coming back.
Right. And it's a fun thing to talk about, because I think, Christian, what you're saying is, I agree. Like, it's not like, bump X player down for Velarde, because if Velarde does go back to the first line with Scheif and Connor, obviously, then, most likely, Nemesnikov gets bumped down. But with how well Nemesnikov is playing, do you want him on the fourth line, right? Because I think you would agree, Lowry, Appleton, Niederreiter, they've been so good together. It's not like they're untouchable, but like, you wonder, like, you always have to do things with a purpose, you would think, right? So it's tough to say. But I wanted to go back to Kyle Connor, because, I mean, obviously, he's tied for the league leading goals, or he's second in goals, whatever. He's having an unbelievable year. I mentioned this to Dave right before we went live. Like, I don't think it's talked about enough how much of a bargain Kyle Connor is in that contract, right? Like, the Jets are right up against the salary cap. You could argue that Kyle Connor is an $11 million a year player. Like, is that something for you that is maybe not talked about enough, in terms of just, how good that contract not only looks this year, Christian, but has looked since it was signed by Chevy, whatever that was, 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, that was exactly the conversation surrounding Mark Scheifele, right? When he had his contract, he was putting up the record for most rolled goals in a playoff series in 2018, right? How much of a bargain his contract was. And I think we're in that category now with Kyle Connor, who's not that much younger than Mark Scheifele. But in this era where we've seen the cap go nowhere, which was not anticipated when he signed the deal, because COVID, we didn't know that was coming. But you look at Edmonton, and I'm not saying this is why Edmonton is struggling or why Toronto is struggling, but they've got such top loaded salary cap situations where they've got multiple dudes making over 10 mil a year. And we might end up seeing this with Colorado down the road, but the way that the Jets have balanced out their roster, having their best players making less than the best players on other teams are making, that's got to be a huge help for Chevy in this market, where it's no secret it's not exactly the easiest to get free agents to come to. So for Kyle Connor to stay here for that reduced rate, he's getting paid to score, right? And his defensive metrics, I think, will always be something that leaves some people wanting. But I mean, if he's putting up 50 goals and 100 points a year, making what he's making, that's
who cares if he can't play defense?
They got defensemen. I mean, Mark Scheifele stepped it up this year for sure, but it's definitely a good thing for this team. And I think as long as we're in Winnipeg, we're going to be the ones talking about things, and probably other people won't be talking about them. I think we understand that, how the way the media works in Canada, especially when there's tire fires and in a couple other Canadian cities. So Kyle Connor's not going to be top of mind. But for us, definitely a bargain. And I think that's something that's really helping this team.
You know, something that's helping this team is contributions up and down the lineup. And one of the guys making those contributions who's already matched his total from last season is Mason Appleton. And there's a lot of, questions from folks. Is Adam Lowry making Mason Appleton better, or is Mason Appleton's play this season making, that line better overall? But what have you seen from Mason Appleton as he's matched his goal total in 16 games that he had from 51 last season?
Well, I think the biggest thing is he's finishing. I know last year, or really every season I've seen him play, he puts himself in good situations to score and doesn't score.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been the biggest thing for him, and why it didn't work on the top line to some degree. Also, I just think the speed of it was not quite right for him. But he goes off the top line, the motion, and he immediately starts killing it with Niederreiter and Lowry, right? And that line has been so good in all areas of the ice, more or less, since they were put together. And I think Niederreiter's smarts and knowledge of what to do on the ice, he's just always making the right play. I think that's been a huge part of elevating Appleton's game, because Appleton and Lowry played together a lot, but it's really Niederreiter, I think, that has boosted that line. And we're seeing the goals that Appleton is scoring too, right? They're from dirty areas. Last night, he scored from 5 inches away on just a perfect net drive and an unreal pass from Niederreiter. Right, Adam Lowry is a really good player, but he's not the offensive player that Nino Niederreiter is, right? And I think that you're bringing a guy who's a second line, maybe borderline close to top line, putting him on the third line. That kind of offensive skill, I think, lifts all boats. And what we've seen is Mason Appleton being in the right spot a lot, but now finishing because he's been receiving great passes, and he's just going. His knowledge of where to go on the ice and the offensive end is really solid. And now he's putting it in the net, and that's great to see.
Christian Amell from CJOB is our guest Saturday morning. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Christian, a guy who was sort of in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons last year and maybe the last couple of years was Neil Pionk, and his struggles were well documented. So far this year, I'm not sure that necessarily we're seeing him revert back to how he was, say, 3 years ago, when he was really a tremendous defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets and seemed like a great acquisition in the Jacob Trouba trade. But he seems to really have steadied himself a little bit. I guess what my question would be, what has your assessments been so far of Neil Pionk's game this year? There's definitely times where there's struggles, and there's definitely times where he's got some peaks and valleys, but it seems like the peaks aren't as high and the valleys aren't as low as the last couple of years.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think what we saw at first was, wow, this guy can really drive play. And then what we saw was, oh, he's not anymore, and he's a defensive liability. This isn't good. And I've heard rumblings that he hasn't been healthy, but he played a lot. So I don't know how much are you playing through that. If you're not effective, should you just take a break? This season, I think he's been pretty steady, right? At first, with Brendan Dillon, I was a little bit iffy on that pairing. I wasn't sure, but I think defensively, they've had better moments than they had in the past. And I think on the balance of play, there's been some rough spots, but overall, I think it's been pretty solid, which is the Jets needed that, right? Going into this season, you're looking at, okay, what do they need to not necessarily take the next step, but certainly improve on last year and just sneaking into the playoffs. And I think a big thing was Cole Perfetti making a big leap and Neil Pionk being a solid second pairing defenseman, right? Because after Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello last year, there were a lot of gaps in the defensive zone. And so if Pionk can elevate his play, and I think he really has, I think he's been a pretty solid defender. I think we've looked at last night, how he was able to jumpstart the Perfetti goal by making a great play behind his own net. And he's still able to pitch in occasionally offensively, really not as big a part of his game anymore. But that's okay. If you're playing great defense, and Brendan Dillon's lighting the lamp like he has been, then they don't need the contributions quite as much from the back end.
Christian, I wanted to ask you about Rasmus Kupari, because obviously, he left the game against the Devils. He hasn't been, blowing anybody out of the water with his offensive statistics, right? But I think you'd agree that he's been very impressive. He was probably the least known out of the 3 LA Kings that came over. I think you'd agree, right? But what I wanted to ask you is, what do you see happening with his future? Because it seems like a guy like Kupari, he would be a guy that the Jets would consider re-signing to. I'm not sure how many years, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years once his contract expires.
Yeah, probably 2, right? He's still pretty young. The first thing is he's fast, right? He's
Yep.
he's really quick with the puck, and sometimes it seems like he's almost too fast, right? Where he's going so fast, and then the puck kind of leaves him because he's going so fast. And those offensive skills may come, they may not. We're not quite sure what kind of player he's going to be
It's
yet.
like Drew at the buffet table, Christian.
Oh yeah, me
He's
too.
going so fast that he doesn't have time to put all the food on his plate.
I miss buffets. COVID kind of killed
I do too.
buffets. There's a lot. There's still some, but there's not as many as they used to be. But I think that for Kupari, I'm not quite sure what he is yet, right? Because again, he hasn't played that much. He's been very fast. Are those offensive skills going to come along, right? Because so far this season, if you say of the 12 Jets forwards, he's probably number 12, right? And that's not really a dig at him. That's just he's a young guy on the fourth line that hasn't had a lot of NHL experience yet. So I think he's definitely got potential. I think we've seen the kind of speed he has. Speed isn't everything, but that definitely at the NHL level is an asset to have. So down the road, is he going to be a player for this team? Maybe on the third line, potentially could be on the second line. We'll see how things go over the course of time. But I mean, the Jets getting Iafallo and Velarde probably would have been enough. I think
That's what I said at the time, Christian. If you go back to when that trade was made, I think if it's Iafallo and Velarde straight up for Dubois, I think the Jets win that trade. Then you throw in Kupari in the second round draft pick.
Yeah.
And to me, again, Chevy isn't paying me to say this. I think Chevy deserves a lot of credit for winning that trade, and I think Chevy deserves a lot of credit for getting Nino Niederreiter for a second round pick with an extra year on his contract.
Yeah, I remember the trade deadline day and thinking, and I think we talked about this on the air because I think they played that. I think it was against Edmonton that day. But on the pregame show, we were like, "That's it? You got Nemestikov and Niederreiter? Really? Do you really want to win? Like, what are we doing here?" And sure, they didn't really. Maybe he saw that it was going down the drain last year. Didn't want to do anything crazy last year, but Niederreiter and Nemestikov have been just beautiful pieces to have for this lineup because of their versatility. And we've seen how they have elevated the games of their line mates, right? Nemestikov's not putting up crazy stats, and I do anticipate he'll be the one that goes to the fourth line once Velarde comes back and everyone is back and firing again. But the impact he's had on Ehlers and Perfetti has been immense. And Niederreiter, we've talked about how much he has boosted that third line. So yeah, Chevy's been making good moves, right? I feel like we often criticize it at the time, but they have panned out for the most part. And I still, the one move that I'm still not sure about is trading the 2 second round picks for Dillon and Schmidt. And I understand why they did that at the time, because they thought they were perhaps closer than they actually were. But turns out that season was about to be a complete disaster with Paul Maurice leaving. And now they have Schmidt, who's not playing and making a lot of money. Dillon, on the other hand, I think is a pretty rock solid defender. But so you're kind of in a bit of a pickle with the Schmidt deal. But overall, yeah, Chevy's done a pretty good job, and he'll have moves to make this season for sure. And every time you do anything as a GM, that's another chance to litigate your record. And so I'm sure we'll do that on our shows. You'll do that on your shows. We'll continue this chatter, and in a year or two, we'll look back and be like, oh yeah, that wouldn't work too.
Well, Christian, heading into the offseason, looking ahead a little bit on the defensive end, the Jets have 2 UFAs in 33-year-old Brendan Dillon and 30-year-old Dylan DeMello. The right side, of course, is not a lot of depth there, obviously up with the Jets, and even organizationally, we've got Elias Salamonson, the 2022 second rounder. He's over with Schlefka, but he's most likely going to probably jump up and play with the Moose next season. So what would you do if you're the Jets GM putting on your GM hat? Do you think you're bringing back either of those 2 players, or do you think the left side is kind of logged and you might want to bring back Dylan DeMello just for how good he's been and also at his age?
I think you bring back Dylan DeMello because of how well he's played with Josh Morrissey. I think they've created that, he's not putting up offensive numbers, and that's not what he's here for. It seems like the Jets have this one guy who's really defensive, one guy who gets all the points on their D pairings. And for Morrissey and DeMello, they've been really good in that regard. At some point, does it run out? Of course, it runs out for everybody, but I don't think that time is nearly yet. Second pairing, you're looking at, okay, now we have conversations to make, right? I think Dylan still has it, but he's obviously closer to the end. I think he's the oldest player on the team. Mm-hmm. And then down the lineup, right? I love Sandberg's game. right? I think he's absolutely a guy that could be here for the next 8 to 10 years, whether it's third or second pairing. I don't think he's top pairing, but in terms of his defensive abilities, we're seeing it, his shot blocking abilities, penalty killing abilities. And then after that, you have to trust your organizational depth and your scouting and how things are developing with the Moose, because we just have not seen enough to make judgments on several of the players down at the AHL level, right? I want to see Chisholm at the NHL level. I want to see what he can do. Billy Hanel as well. We still need to see more from him. So it's kind of, there's a bit of a conundrum, right? Because you don't want to make any crazy moves for the future until you see what you've got. But until you see what you've got, you got no space for the guys that are the future. So do you want to just go out on a limb, trade guys, and then, all right, here you go. And what if they don't work? Now what do you do? So that is the pickle, and that's why Chevy gets paid and a lot more than we do, as you said. So yeah, I think I wonder about Pionk too, because right, again, the right shot part of it, you like to have that balance. Where's his game gonna go? Is it gonna be steady? Is he gonna find it and be a guy that can be a really solid 2A, 2B for the next 5 to 6 years? If so, then the Jets have got one, right? But it's up to him to keep his play at this level, and if he can do that, then I think the Jets are pretty set with what they see there in most of their decor.
Christian, last one for you. And with all due respect to the Jets and the Coyotes tonight, I think most people in Manitoba will have their attention firmly on the city of Hamilton tomorrow late afternoon as the Bombers and the Alouettes do battle for another Grey Cup. From your perspective, the Bombers, we know, are heavy favorites entering the game. We know that they've had the pedigree for the last number of years. We know that last year's defeat, last year's upset is still a sour taste in their mouth. What is the determining factor in tomorrow's Grey Cup that's going to result in the Bombers being crowned champions of the CFL for another season?
Turnovers, simply. If the Bombers don't turn the ball over, they win the Grey Cup. I think it's that simple, honestly. And by the way, Adam Bighill and Dalton Schoen are listed on the roster as game time decisions. I still don't think they're going to play.
No, we started the show with that because the roster came out at about 9 a.m. when we started, and I think that's a little gamesmanship from the Bombers there.
Yeah, so Greg McRae will play, and then Winston Rose will come in on defense in Adam Bighill's roster spot with Shane Gauthier playing in the middle. But we've seen Montreal play the Bombers twice this year and do nothing on offense for 2 games, right? 6 offensive points in 2 games. They spotted them 2 pick sixes in a 47-17 win. Don't do that tomorrow, because we saw what Montreal did against Toronto last week. 9 turnovers is absurd. They would have won it with 5 probably, but Montreal's offense in that game had like 200 yards, right? They're not Cody Fajardo. I've never been a really big believer in him. And yes, the Montreal defense is really good, and they didn't have Darnell Sankey when they played the Bombers earlier in the season, and Sean Lemon was still kind of new. But I think if Winnipeg takes care of the football, they're going to win this game. I just don't think Montreal's offense can put up enough points to do damage unless they get a bunch of short fields. So 20 points maybe could even be enough to win this game. I think it's good, really hard for me to imagine Montreal winning it. Crazy things have happened in Grey Cups before. We've seen great Calgary teams lose. We've seen great Montreal teams lose. These great legacy teams not pull it out in the end. Crazy things happen all the time in football. But this could end up being, I think, more like the 2019 Grey Cup than the 21 Grey Cup, where we saw Winnipeg kind of just get out and bludgeon Hamilton for 60 minutes. I think we're probably leaning more towards that than, oh my God, how do they pull that out in Hamilton in 2021?
And Christian, most importantly, Brady Oliveira avoided the MOP curse. Right, so the Bombers are going to win. He got most valuable Canadian, but he avoided the MOP curse, so we're good.
Yeah,
Bombers win 27-10.
Yeah, Bombers got no awards except for that one. They've got, if it's possible to have chips on your shoulder after going to 4 straight Grey Cups and winning 2 of the last 3, then perhaps they've found them. But I think this sets up so well. I think I think the national media is maybe trying to talk ourselves into why Montreal can make this close. It just seems hard to imagine Winnipeg not getting this done, and perhaps by a few touchdowns.
There you go. You heard it here first,
I'm with
folks. The
Christian.
Bombers and the Alouettes. That'll be
Blue.
tomorrow. Tonight, we have the Jets and the Coyotes. CJOB 680 will have coverage of that and everything else all week long, of course, as they always do. Christian Amell, thanks so much. Great first appearance, great debut appearance here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We'll do it again real soon, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Take care. There he
Thanks,
goes.
Christian.
Amell
And
joining
Sully.
us this morning. And Sully, of course, and the rest of the dogs and lizards in the Amell household. When we come back, more Jets talk. We have Kevin Woodley coming up at the bottom of the hour. It's a Saturday morning. You spend it with Illegal Curve because that's what you do each and every Saturday. Drew Mindell, Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg with you.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Whoa, Ezzy. Everything okay? You look stressed.
Of course I'm stressed. We're moving, the house is upside down, the kids failed miserably at packing the fine china, and my life is in chaos. Chaos!
Yes, that does sound like a problem.
What am I going to do?
Ezzy, relax. Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage is the answer. With 60 years of experience in moving Manitobans and a track record of exemplary customer service, one call to Rolly's and your stress is gone. No job is too big or too small. Just visit Rollies.com and they will take it from there.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage, online at Rollies.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to test if the game is better at home or at Boston Pizza. The results are irrefutable. Catch the game at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your VP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at ZappiaGroup.com.
Are you dreaming of your very own backyard rink this winter, but dreading the work involved? Well, stress no longer, because the Rink Guys are here to make it happen. The Rink Guys are Winnipeg's first outdoor skating rink installation and rink maintenance service. The Rink Guys offer free site evaluations and different rink construction options. Plus, they use a custom-sized liner to prevent any damage to your lawn. Lighting packages are also available to help illuminate your rink during those long, dark winter nights. To get your rink started today, visit therinkguys.com. The second hour of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show consistently starts past the hour, and today we're still consistent. So there's something to be said for that. Drew Mindell, Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. Reminder, the Illegal Curve post-game show later tonight after the Jets and the Coyotes, right around 8:45.
Dave Manouk and mystery guest.
Dave Manouk and mystery guest. I think this is going to become a new segment. Our buddy Joe Pascucci tweeted at us, another Winnipeg Jets on this day in Jets history, November 18th, 1981. It's a battle royal between Lucien Dubois and Craig Hartsburg in the penalty box.
Wow.
Let's go to the video on this one. It's an entertaining one. I was watching this in the middle of the commercial. They're throwing fists in the penalty box. Here we go. Look at this. I love it. Can you imagine that if this happened nowadays in the penalty box? There's look at the helmet punch off. Look at the Hartsburg's helmet punch gets blown right off his head in the punch.
I also love the fact that it's Dino Cicerelli there watching beside Dave Babich.
I believe this was back and to the left, if you want, from the Seinfeld episode. Back and to the left. Back and to the left goes Hartsburg's face.
Quite
and
the right
his
hand by
helmet.
Deblois there, Drew.
I know. That's what I'm saying. This day in Winnipeg Jets history, courtesy of our buddy Joe Pascucci, November 18th, 1981. That
Dave
is
Christian there?
What'd you say, Ezzy?
Dave Christian there of the Christian Hockey Stick family?
I see Dave Babich. I see Dino Cicerelli.
And then Dave Christian comes in there at the end.
Yeah,
see
yeah,
there,
there's Dave Christian.
No, 13. Dave Christian. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with who Trimper is. Anybody know Trimper? I mean, I think some of the old timers in the chat might know who Trimper is, but considering I was
You're a bit of a trimper, Drew.
What's that, Ezzy?
You're a bit of a trimper.
I don't know if it being a trimper is a compliment or an insult, but I was 2 months old when this happened, so you'll forgive me for not knowing who Trimper is.
I wasn't born yet. I was born July 1982. Drew, I think that you had your bar mitzvah that year, right?
You know what? I just said I wasn't born. I was 2 months old. You can't go back and then try and throw it against me at this point in time. But anyways, there you go. Courtesy of our buddy Joe Pascucci, this day in Winnipeg.
I'm with you though.
History.
I mean, sometimes it's just fun.
Tim Trimper says Billy Yo-Yo.
Okay,
there you go. So I guess it's a good point that Matthew Thompson makes, because last year on the last week on November 11th they got beat 15-2. So maybe they were a little bit upset and decided to take
wasn't
it out
that
on
Dale
Craig
Howardchuck's
Hartsburg's
rookie year, or was that the next year?
His rookie year.
He drafted in 81 or 82.
He was drafted in. Now you're asking me difficult questions, Ezzy. You're putting me on the spot. In any event, there you go. There's the video of the day, courtesy of our buddy Joe Pascucci. I don't think you're going to see any penalty box fights in today's game.
Howardchuck was drafted first overall in 1981.
81. There you guys go. Doug is saying how young we are. I think, Doug, it's more that you're just even older than we are. I think that's the difference. Bailey's young. We're old. Doug, and I love you. Doug, you're just decrepit is what it is. That's what's happening there.
My lower back will tell you that I'm not young anymore.
As your lower back was bad when you were 18, though. I don't think that's necessarly an age-related
and it's
thing.
gotten even worse since I've been carrying the Illegal Curve Hockey Show for the last 14 and a half years.
Oh, zing.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
That was a good one indeed. There's Andrew's more on Tim Trimper. That's why I love this show. All you folks in the chat somehow are pulling out Tim Trimper statistics and remembrances on this random Saturday morning. So that's terrific. Good job, all of you, for joining us this morning, and good job, of course, to our buddy Joe Pascucci. Keep sending those along. Keep sending those ones along. As the Jets and the Coyotes will do battle again later today, and I think it's sort of a similar game plan for the Jets, similar recipe for success to what they had in Arizona a couple weeks ago. You have to take advantage of the Coyotes defense. That's where they're at their weakest. That's where they're at their most vulnerable. We know that their forward group is better than it has been in past years. So that who you have to be worried about from the Coyotes' perspective. And that's sort of where you have to go from there. Juuso Valimaki out of the Coyotes lineup, so he's not going to be on the back end for the Coyotes today. So they're even thinner, on defense. So that's where the Jets have to take advantage of it, albeit against a rested Coyotes team, against a Jets team playing the second of back-to-backs here, Ezzy.
Yeah, and recently the Coyotes beat the Stars 7-5, right? Wasn't it 7-5? Yeah. So I mean, like. The Coyotes, I think, since that.
No, I think that was Nashville, Ezzy.
Oh, sorry, Nashville. They beat Nashville 7-5. Yeah, for a second I was like, I don't think anybody's beating Dallas. the way how successful they've been. But the point is, since the Jets beat the Coyotes in Tempe, they've won 3 of their 5 games, and the other games they lost were 1-goal games.
Mm-hmm.
Coyotes team is a competitive team this year, and we've talked about it, right? Like Sean Durzi. I really like that trade. Matt Dumba, they've just augmented their decor, and Logan Cooley, guys, like can't be understated. Like similar kind of impact that Matty Beniers had in his rookie year in Seattle. Like Logan Cooley's that good that he instantly makes a team better. And obviously, there's always going to be the debate, whether the Habs should have taken Logan Cooley, but
Well, it's pretty clear right now which of the two players between Slafkovsky and Cooley,
and they're
who's
both young,
succeeding.
right? Like,
of course,
yeah,
they're both young.
let's not get too excited, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, Clayton Keller. I mean, he's been a really good player for the Coyotes for a while now. Nick Schmaltz, I think, is an underrated player. So there's got a lot of talent, and Vejmelka is usually solid in net. He wasn't. I wouldn't say he was, that great in the game a couple of weeks back, Dave, but he has that ability. He's a good, solid. He's established himself as a number one goalie in the league. So yeah, the Coyotes give up a lot on defense. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think you necessarily want to trade chances with this team either.
Yeah, and as the one thing I want to say, and I think I'm going to highlight Daryl's comment because it's one I want to reiterate or mention, I should say, is that it really is up to Laurent Brossoit, who hasn't played up to the standard that we know he's capable of, to play up to the standard that we know he's capable of. Because for when you look at quality starts, and we can talk about it with Kevin Woodley, I'm not sure he's given the Jets one yet. So from that perspective, that's one of the things. And look, up until last night, you could say Connor Hellebuyck had some quality starts in the how many games has he played now? He played 14, I think. No, I'm saying Hellebuyck, but I'm saying, like, I think he's had a lot of quality starts. He's also had a few stinkers that don't expect from Connor Hellebuyck. He's in that sort of situation turned it around a little bit after what we saw yesterday. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we expected this Jets team to be better at, right? Was their goaltending. The 5-on-5 has been the surprise of the season without question. But the goaltending and one of the things about that 5-on-5, and you're hearing it from players, is the system. And obviously, like, the systems are generally fairly similar, and there's not huge variations. But just listen to what Kyle Connor said this week about having now had a full season of the Rick Bowness system, and now having really that comfort in it. It seems like this team is accepting a different, way to play the game a little bit. And it's worked for them because, again, they weren't this good a 5-on-5 team last year. And that, again, speaks to the depth. And we've talked about that enough, as would say. We don't have to go back there. But to me, it's just a function of this team feeling a lot more comfortable in their skin, playing within that framework that Rick Bowness has created.
They really do seem to be a unified front, and I mean, you saw it again last night. You punch one of them, you got three guys coming at you. I mean, it was the one late in the game. Yeah, late in the game when
Zach Benson.
Thank you. My brain was going blank there for a second. Zach Benson, takes some liberties. I think it was against Morrissey, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong.
Technically, it was against Hellebuyck.
Well, fine, right. But Morrissey was right involved in the scrum. And then you saw three Jets players swarm him. Now, look, I know that that's going to happen, more often than not on most teams. But it does seem like this Winnipeg Jets group is, again, I mean, we don't need to rehash the addition by subtraction of the dressing room and everything else. But, and certainly playing well, like 8-2-2 in your last 12 games certainly goes a long way to getting these good vibes feeling there. But it does seem like this team, the connectivity of this team, I think, is a valid talking point so far this season, Ezzy.
Yeah, and I think, you have to give a lot of credit to the leadership, right? Like guys like Josh Morrissey and obviously the captain, Adam Lowry. But yeah, Alex Iafallo has fit in really nicely into this team, not just his production on the ice, but his personality, right? Like, you just have to listen to the way Kyle Connor talks about Iafallo on his line, right? Or Mark Scheifele talking about Alex Iafallo. And we talked about this at the time of the trade. Iafallo has been in the league for quite a while now. It's not like this is his, second or third year. But yeah, it does seem from the outside that this is a tighter knit group, right? Like, you saw Nikolai Ehlers, for example, drop the gloves against Brendan Smith earlier this week on the Devils, right? Like, it's a different team. And just by taking Blake Wheeler off the roster, it makes it a different team. Like, forget all the other moves that were made, like bringing back Vlad Nemesnikov or whatever move you want to point to. And mainly, obviously, at the forward position, because the defense is exactly the same as last year, right? But I think that it does seem like a different Jets team. I mean, you just can't not talk about the improved play at 5-on-5, and also how Hellebuyck and or Brossoit hasn't had to steal games, really, maybe with the exception of last night. Last night's game against the Sabres, guys, was maybe the first game of the year in which you could really say, okay, Hellebuyck badly outplayed Comrie. he deserves a lot of credit. And that's not taking, anything away from Nick Ehlers' knuckleball game-winning goal. But, certainly, early in the season at least, and you're right, Drew, it's still early. 16 games is early, but it's not, we're not going to be saying this after 30 games or after 40 games. At a certain point, you have to just say the Jets are a good team. Joe Pascucci and I talked about this, after the Jets Stars game. Yeah. I still think the Jets are probably the third best team in the Central, and that's nothing against the Jets. It's just that Colorado and Dallas are really good teams, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets finish second in the Central. I wouldn't be that shocked actually if they finish first, but it looks like right now, clearly Dallas is playing at a higher level than the rest of the teams in the Central. But, the Jets have points in 9 of their last 11 games. So, they're going to face some tough teams coming up in Tampa Bay and Florida. And then they've got Dallas again coming up on the 27th or the 28th. So, the schedule is going to get a little bit harder, Dave. But, right now you have to say that, this team is, it's a tighter knit group. And it's just it's looking like a better team. And even though the Jets started last season, with points in 11 of their first 15 games, it just seems like a more sustainable type of winning that the Jets are doing this year.
Well, I think the big difference, and sorry, Dave, is that if you had said, last year you couldn't say that the Jets have 9 wins in their first 16 games, and Connor Hellebuyck is really the driving force behind one of those wins. That just wouldn't be a topic. That he was the driving force behind every Jets win for the most part last year. That's, I think, the huge difference is exemplified just through that sort of analysis.
Mm-hmm. No, I think there's no question about it. And that's what we've been talking about fairly consistently throughout the course of the season. And some folks in the chat are saying that Hellebuyck won them the Jets the Oilers game. So even adding that,
I would agree with that. That's
even adding adding
that game.
No, but sure, but that was early in the season, Drew. But even adding that game to the list,
right?
You've got to look at it and say, well, that's just 2 of the games. And you're right. Your point is still valid, because ultimately last year there were every game, game after game. We did 82 of them. We talked about it. Connor Hellebuyck. If Connor Hellebuyck didn't do this, and we used to say, you don't apologize for having one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. That's just the reality of your team. So the fact is, if the Jets are playing the way they are currently playing as a collective group, and Connor Hellebuyck hasn't necessarily caught up to that, well, it stands to reason that if your 5-on-5 play is not going to drop off, and you're now getting into the sample size where 16 games, Drew, we were talking about this. You're almost a quarter of the way through the season.
Yeah.
So you're starting to become who your record shows that you are. And if you get Connor Hellebuyck now, who's still going to play the majority of these games, even with Laurent Brossoit as his backup, if you get Connor Hellebuyck to get back to that level that we're used to seeing, yeah, absolutely. This Jets team is definitely, and of course, special teams, but that's not as important as your 5-on-5 play. So to me, this Jets team, if you can get Connor Hellebuyck back up to the level we saw yesterday, hopefully you don't need him that much, because again, you don't want to see the Jets regressing to what they used to do, which was overly rely on him and not play an effective team game. But sometimes you want to throw that off. Buffalo was looking to, get out of a slump. They obviously had Tuck back. They had Benson back. They had Comrie back. So, Buffalo was hungry. They knew that they're a bit desperate. They're looking to get back on track for their season. So, and that's why we always say it's not just that there's one hockey team that's playing the game. There's 2 teams, and you got to factor that into the game. So Hellebuyck stepped up, and that's what the Jets needed. And the 5-on-5 play has been excellent. So if those 2 things stay true, it's going to serve the Jets very well.
Well, think about it. Last number of years, let's say last 3 years, how it was a surprise when the Jets would win the possession battle. Now it's almost the flip of that. It's been so far this year a bit of a surprise when the Jets haven't won the possession battle. And the Jets like last night, they certainly lost the possession battle. I think they lost the possession battle on Tuesday against New Jersey as well, but that wouldn't have been that probably
last night was more one-sided though.
Last night was certainly more one-sided.
Second and third periods were all Buffalo.
Yes, there's no question about it. Last night was one of the more one-sided games. And if you look at the bulk of the Jets' success, it's not because they're outscoring their problems. Again, this was which was so often the case, that they are doing it on the defensive side of things. Very largely. Their expected goals for only is puts them at 22nd in the NHL. But then you look at their expected goals against. Well, that it's much better. In that category, their expected goals against is just outside the top 10 in the league. So I mean, if this is a Winnipeg Jets team that is doing it largely by starting in their own zone, a team that, I'll be honest, I didn't know that they had that in them, because we haven't seen that. They've always talked the big game for the last number of years about how it starts in their own zone, and it starts in front of Connor Hellebuyck, and it starts by playing better with their own defensive system. But then immediately they would lose that structure, and then it would be Captain Chaos out there instead. And again, small sample size, but the sample size is growing, so it's not a tiny sample size. It's not 3 games anymore. It's now up to 16 games. That seems to be the structure that
Sure.
they're maintaining the structure that they haven't been able to do for so many years before.
And we talked to Christian O'Mell last segment, obviously, about the Jets. But when you asked him about the Bombers, and Drew, you watch football more than Dave and I do. But I mean, turnovers are almost always a factor in football, or a lot of the time it's a factor when let's say you have 2 evenly matched teams, right? I think the Bombers, you would agree, still have the edge. But turnovers to me are also something that you've seen start to kind of creep back into the Jets game. We saw that on Dallas's first goal yesterday. It was at the first goal. Pardon me, not Dallas. Buffalo's first goal, the one that the turnover where Hellebuyck
it was the first goal with
I forget if it was the first goal or the second goal.
First goal. Second goal was
Alex Tuck that scored that goal.
That's right.
Dave
Second goal
Tuck.
was the breakaway by Peterka.
There you go. Yeah, you're right. So that was a turnover, but also you go back to that Dallas game. There were some pretty bad turnovers. Cole Perfetti turned over the puck to Wyatt Johnston. That was Dallas's second goal that made it 2-0 at the time. So that's another thing too, right? Like, turnovers happen for every team. We're not saying that the Jets have to be perfect and never cough up the puck, but I think that's another thing too that we've seen in certain situations where the Jets are kind of gifting goals to teams. They're still the better even strength team most nights. Not last night against Buffalo. Maybe not so much against the New Jersey Devils, who also came into that game desperate, as Dave said, and you do have to factor that in there, especially when you're playing a team out of conference. It's not a team you're expecting to see a lot, and the Coyotes are going to be pretty desperate as well, because we talked about it. They're 2 points behind the Jets. I mean, the Coyotes know that it's not like the Jets look at this game and they say it's an important Central Division matchup. The Coyotes do as well, even though I think we'd all agree the Jets have a higher ceiling. This isn't going to be an easy game for the Jets. We talked about it. The Coyotes put up 7 goals against Nashville. Nashville's a pretty good defensive team, so
they have a pretty good goalie.
They have to keep going. But I think if you want to compare this year to last year, this seems more real than last year, I would argue.
I would agree with that. Worth noting as well about the Coyotes, Dave, Barrett Hayden is out of the lineup for them tonight. I think he's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. He suffered an injury earlier this week, I think, in the game against
Barrett
Columbus.
Hayden has a goal yet this year.
He doesn't, but he had a really weird stat line. I remember talking about it a couple of weeks ago. He had a really weird stat line, but they don't have the depth. The Coyotes don't really have the depth in order to suffer, to handle significant injuries. And that's certainly one. He's a contributing member of that Coyotes team. And Matias Michelli is also a day-to-day. So he had some dental work done, according to our buddy Craig Morgan. He must have eaten a puck, is my guess, or something along those lines, or a stick. And so he's day-to-day, and it's questionable if he's going to be in the Coyotes lineup.
Just a note, Drew, Travis Boyd. So Barrett Hayton was centering Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller. It's going to be Travis Boyd who's going to be centering that top line now.
Well, and I mean, Travis Boyd is a journeyman veteran guy at this point in his career, so it's certainly not the same level of firepower that the Coyotes have up front, and so the Jets need to take advantage of that. Look, no team ever feels sympathy for their opponents when their opponents are going through the injury bug. The Jets certainly have their share of injuries as well. The question is, how do you respond in the face of those injuries, and where do you go from there, Dave?
Yeah, and just quickly before we go to break, and welcome Kevin Woodley on the other side.
He does actually have 2 goals. Sorry.
So just want to mention that the Santa Claus parade is at 5:00 today. The Jets game is at 6:00 today. So for those of you going, just be aware, if you're north of Portage, park north of Portage. If you're south of Portage, park south of Portage. Do not try and take Portage. It's going to be a little hectic. So I saw Kenny's water bottle asking that question. I just wanted to let people know, just be aware. The parade starts at 5. Once the game is over, shouldn't be an issue, but getting to the game could be a bit of a problem. So just be aware of that when you're trying. And if you're going to try and cross Portage, go into Portage Place and use the Skywalk.
That's exactly right. That advice courtesy of our friend Krista at True North, who sent that out via email yesterday as well. If you're coming north of Portage, stay north of Portage. If you're coming south of Portage, stay south of Portage. And
if you're east or west, we got no answers.
Exactly.
Drew, where's the coal in Kentucky? Is it East Kentucky or West Kentucky that has the coal?
The coal is in eastern Kentucky. That's where towards Appalachia is where that is. But thank you for asking there, Ezzy. I'm picturing, Dave, if you want to go back to Seinfeld again, remember the Puerto Rican Day Parade episode where they're trying to cross the street and they're trapped behind all the bleachers and everything else. That's sort of what I'm picturing today as people try and maneuver their ways into downtown Winnipeg for both the Santa Claus Parade and the Jets and the Coyotes.
As Vern says, the roads closed at 11 o'clock this morning. So
there you go. So good luck to everybody venturing downtown today. May God have mercy on all of you. When we come back, Kevin Woodley is going to join us. He's with In Goal Magazine. He also covers the Canucks, so we'll talk about goaltending. We'll talk a little bit about the Canucks start to the season, and of course, much more Jets talk to come. It's a Saturday morning. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. We're live on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. The Jets and the Coyotes later on this afternoon, this evening, and then post-game right around 8:45 p.m. We're thrilled to welcome to the program from NHL.com, from In Goal Magazine, our good friend Kevin Woodley joins us on the program. Kevin, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. How are things on the left coast?
Hey, I mean, after a decade of misery, they're pretty good out here right now for a change.
Right on.
Decade of misery. Is that the slogan? I'm not sure if that's going on the slogan or not. But
no, I don't think they hang that one in the locker. It's not one of Rick Tockett's 4 pillars that he posts on the locker room walls.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like it anyways. I might steal it if you don't mind. You mentioned that things are going pretty well after the decade of misery, and we'll touch on the Canucks as well, throughout the course of this interview. I guess, maybe we'll start there. I mean, everyone keeps saying that it's going to regress. The PDO can't stay where it is, and that's all probably true. But do the Canucks care? Because at this point in time, the points are still in the bank. It's not like the points get reduced when the PDO regresses.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there's a lot of these games early in the season that they're winning 5-2, 6-2, lopsided scores. That's how you get to lead the league in goal differential last time I checked. Mm-hmm. So, when it regresses, can you still win those ones 2-1, 3-2 tight games? I guess we'll wait and see. But the reality is the structure is just so much better. The buy-in defensively, backtracking, things that are commonplace in Winnipeg and have been for years actually happen here now on the defensive end. It's not just about, they've made personnel changes on defense that have, provided significant upgrades, although we'll see how they do now without Carson Soucy for the next 6 to 8 weeks. Not that he's playing on a third pair. He was on the second unit penalty kill. He wasn't, a leading cog, but he was a big part of improving the balance on the back end after you get past that. Excuse me, guys. After you get past that first pairing with Hughes and Hronek. So, yes, this is not sustainable. I don't even know what the PDO is today. There are some things they do offensively that, I think lead to, they create quality. They don't create volume. They do create a decent amount of quality, and they've got elite finishers on the top 2 lines, and they've got Quinn Hughes on the back end. So, might they be a team that has a PDO a little bit above 100? Yes. To the degree it is now, no. Even when you look at Thatcher Demko and his numbers, I think last I checked, he's plus 5% on expected save percentage. And the best season we've seen in the last 10 years is probably Igor Shesterkin, and he was around +3. So as good as we know he is, as much as they've improved defensively to give him a more predictable structure in front of him and kept it on one half of the ice more often than not, so he's not getting extended and sprawling like he used to have to do 5, 6, 7 times a night behind this team, it's still going to come down. History just tells us that's the case. The question is whether they can continue to keep winning. And as you said, I think they've got enough points in the bank that, probably a little bit sub 500 gets it done. Math is not my strong suit. I haven't done it, but they're in good shape, right? Making the playoffs was the goal this year. And they're showing that's a strong likelihood. And the question now is, can you continue to build on some of those elements I talked about so that when you get there, you at least have a chance to be a tough out?
Right, exactly. I agree with what you said there. The start that they've had allows them, to have a blip on the radar, right? It allows them to lose some games and still be comfortably in a playoff spot. And I think for a team that didn't have the highest expectations, Edmonton Oilers, then that helps, and the Oilers will push, obviously. But I think you're right. I mean, the Canucks, regardless of if the PDO stays around where it is at now, I think you would agree that they've been one of the most surprising teams. Kevin, I want to ask you about Thatcher Demko. I texted you, earlier this week, and I think that nobody is surprised. I mean, Demko has been a fantastic goaltender since before he came into the NHL. What are you seeing from someone who analyzes goaltenders? And you're right. I mean, his goal save above expected, his save percentage are phenomenal right now. But what are you seeing from him? Because I think you'd agree. Like, Demko has his mechanics and everything like that. He's always been a fantastic goalie, but it seems like dare I say, he has elevated his game to a higher level this year.
Well, I mean, compared to last year, yeah, because last year was tough, right? Like, and cough cough Oilers, right? Like, a lot of focus on goaltending there. But I think the part that gets missed, like Demko had a tough season last year, came back after the injury and finished strong. And I think a lot of people associate his early season struggles strictly with injuries, and that must have been what slowed him down. But out of the gate, he was fine physically. And the reality is, the year before under Boudreau, they were a bottom third team in the NHL defensively. The start last year under Boudreau, they were a bottom 3 team defensively. And it doesn't matter what your goaltender does. Like, it just doesn't matter. Pucks are going in when that's the level of defensive play you've gotten. I mentioned the Oilers because not in zone, but off the rush, they're 32nd in the National Hockey League by Clearsight Analytics in terms of giving up the most dangerous chances the most often. They're giving up laterals. They're giving up odd mans. Like, it's been better the last few games. Yeah, they need a few more saves. Their goalies and their goalie people would tell you that. But when you drop to that level, like, that environment becomes so unpredictable that you don't know which way to go. You're not worried about a shooter and a pass option. You're worried about a shooter and a pass option, where he's going to pass it after that. And so I think getting Tocchet structure defensively in front of him, getting the buy-in they have from all their forwards. I mean, listen, like, at this time last year in this market, the question was, could JT Miller play center? Now JT Miller is a shutdown, getting heavy, like, straight hard matched against Connor McDavid, and I think he held him without a point in 3 games, like, just buried him. So with Brock Besser on his wing, a guy who happens to be tied, last I checked, numbers changed last night and I wasn't watching, I guess, but 13 goals, tied for the league in the National Hockey League. And it's not all by being a sniper, the sort of one-shot guy we think of Brock Besser being. Like, he's playing a shutdown role on a shutdown line. He's net front on the power play. And we talk about PDO and shooting percentage. Well, the way they manage screens, like, they were bottom 3 in the league last year in terms of shots with screens, and now they're in the top third. And guys like Besser, you watch the way that power play works, like, it's purposeful. It's not just standing there. It's pushing a goalie who's looking short side over your shoulder and forcing him to either continue to follow you short side or switch behind you just as the shot's being released so he can't see it. Like, there's a lot going on there. And that's a big part of their success. And obviously, can that continue, right? Relying on the power play as heavily as they have. But in terms of Demko, I just see a guy who was this good 2 years ago with way better support in front of him. And if you want to know what that, like, there's no technical changes. Everything he's doing is the same as it was. And one thing I will say is that defensive support and the trust and the reduction in seam passes compared to years past. Watch where he gets to on the ice. He's getting to the top of his crease more often, whereas he used to, push off the post on a low high play. He's maybe 2/3 depth. And obviously everything is read based. Each play is individual, but I see him getting to the top of his crease more often than he did in the past.
Kevin, last night we saw the Buffalo Sabres in pregame following morning skate. We had a chance to catch up with Eric Comrie, who we know you've spoken with, and we've covered him for many years, and he's a delight to talk to. But, one of the things I thought was interesting, because he was asked about the 3 goalie system. And we've talked to that Marty Baron about, having to play in that type of system. He says it's not a problem based on the way the injuries have worked, that they've really only had 2 at any one time. But how hard is that on a goaltender to play in that sort of system with the 3 guys and not really getting as many regular reps as you might like?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, there's 3 doesn't go into 2, right? Like I said I'm not good at math, but I know that doesn't divide very well. There's 2 nets in practice. Now, the irony is, we're seeing a lot of teams with 3, and I think that's just scared to lose a guy on waivers for the most part, and that's why you're seeing those decisions. But we're also seeing a decrease in the amount of minutes teams are expecting out of their number 1 goalie, right? Like, we're seeing tandems And I think you can take that a step further. If you really want to rest your number one goalie, you should have a practice goalie, right? A guy who can come on and take reps during a practice. Your number one goes out, gets his minutes, say Connor Hellebuck with Wade Flaherty. And they used to do this a little bit in Winnipeg. You go, I think they even had another sheet where he'd go on, he'd get his goalie reps in, but then not have to worry about, literally hundreds of up and downs and the wear and tear on the body of the main practice. Now, that's hard to do with a practice goalie on a regular basis, although interestingly, the Canucks have hired one here in Vancouver. And I know there's one team last year that I haven't been able to pin this down, but I was told by a pretty good source they actually traveled a practice goalie last year, a designated practice goalie, so that their guys could get reps with the goalie coach and rest otherwise. Now, teams tend not to like that, right? Shooters want to shoot on NHL goalies. And we know there's a bunch of teams with like equipment staff or assistant coaches that will also go in net, but the teams don't want to shoot on a guy who's maybe regressed to the point of beer league level or, played in college 15 years ago. They want to shoot on NHL goalies. So having three,
the NHL only uses those guys as the emergency goalies.
Right. Exactly. And so, yeah, so you want to find ways to give your guys rest. And the irony is these 3 goalie systems could potentially be a way to do that. It's not ideal though. Like, obviously, everybody wants to play. Everybody wants their regular reps in practice. And so it's a tough thing to manage. It puts a lot of pressure on the goalie coach to sort of divide things up in a meaningful way for each guy. But, in some ways, I sort of feel like this is the way we're headed. And, this goes to the other point I would make. Like, we look at the NBA and load management and stuff like that. How silly is it if we're worried about starts and rest and making sure our number one goaltender gets to the playoffs 100% healthy? Like we saw a game in Colorado the other night where Lucas Dostal got left in for all 8. Like the Avs were buzzing. It was back-to-back for Anaheim. There's travel. There's elevation. Like it's just a tough night, right? But you knew damn well he was staying in the whole time, right? Because Gibson played the night before. He's not getting in there. So if you, on those nights, maybe even not those nights, any night where your number one's not going. And I've had some people say, hey, like sometimes you need to switch. And if it's not back-to-backs, you are putting him in because margin for error and everything, and your backup has a tough night. But there's a lot of nights where he's not going in and you got him sitting on the bench. Well, it's not just sitting on the bench. It's doing his mental visualization warm-ups. It's getting his body ready to play. It's going through the pregame routine. Like there's a physical and mental toll to sitting on the bench. And so at least when you have a 3-goalie system, I guess the irony is if you have a 3-goalie system, you probably don't have a workhorse, but at least you're able to rotate that round a little bit. So you're not wasting energy on a guy who's not going to play that night because he's sitting on the bench and he had to do his 45 minutes of warm up and his eye drills and his mindset drills and all those different things that come with a burden in terms of energy systems and levels and ultimately drain you a little bit more in terms of what you have left at the end of the year.
Kevin Woodley, our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Kevin covers the Canucks for NHL.com. He covers goaltending for In Goal Magazine. Kevin, here in Winnipeg, Back to the Future with the tandem of Hellebuck and Brossoit. We all expect Hellebuck his numbers to revert back to where they usually are, and he had a great showing last night against the Buffalo Sabres, really backstopping the Jets to a victory. Laurent Brossoit, though, he's only played 3 games so far, but struggled in those 3 games. .872 save percentage, 3.25 goals against average. Is this a function of a player sort of just trying to work their way back from that season-ending injury he suffered and trying to get sort of his skates back underneath him, or do you see more serious cause for concern about him as a sustainable backup goalie for the Jets?
No, I don't have any concern about him as a sustainable backup goalie. Like there's going to be an adjustment period. It's funny. I probably should ask you guys this, like how much differences are there in terms of, the way they play from when he was there last, how many personnel changes are there? Like there's always an adjustment a little bit when you go behind, even if the system's the same and the tendencies are generally similar. Having 1 or 2 or 3 different defensemen and the tendencies they have, like there's an adjustment period there. And so, and as you said, coming off, a summer that started with injury, I think I was actually there when he got back on the ice for the first time up in Kelowna, and that wasn't until August. So, there's probably a little bit, I don't say training wheels, but there's a little bit early in the season with him. And, we know what he is. We know how good he can be. And I liked the idea of, that reunification with Wade Flaherty. And I think you'll get the best. There's just a matter of having a little bit of patience. And the tough part, though, is with and Connor Hellebuyck is digging it. Like, I look at the statistics, he's back above expected. Like, he's digging himself out of that early hole, just as we would all expect. And I'm guessing, knowing how much pressure he puts on himself and how much he wants to excel, that there probably would have worn a little bit of, there felt a little bit of that. You can't try harder in goaltending, but you get that contract and you feel like you need to do more. The numbers back up what you're saying in the eye test with him. The problem is you want to get him back up and going. He's a guy that loves to play a lot. It's tougher to find those spots for Laurent Brossoit. And that makes the challenge, mentally so much as physically, like all the work he'll do in practice to get ready for his next start. When things don't go well out of the gate, you can add a little pressure to yourself. You can start to press a little bit, and that's never been his game. And so, that's Wade's job right now, is to make sure when he does get back in there, he doesn't feel like he has to press or have to do too much and lets the play come to him. It's the easiest thing to say, and oftentimes the hardest thing to do as a goaltender, not to try too hard, to just sit back, be patient, let the play come to you. That next shot mentality, to not worry about the past, not worry about the project into the future, stay in the moment. It's all these things that are so easy to say as goalies, and yet when things don't go well, they get harder and harder to do on the ice.
And Kevin, we should mention again that Laurent Brossoit will get the start tonight versus the Coyotes. Hellebuyck obviously played last night versus Buffalo. I'm not sure if you saw that, or for those people who are just joining us now, LB will get the start versus the Coyotes. And I texted this to you as well, Kevin. Like, I wanted to ask you about the expected 2025 World Cup of Hockey, and it brought up a very interesting debate on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show about who the goaltenders would be for Team Canada and who the goaltenders will be for Team USA. And I think you would agree, it's a lot clearer who the goaltenders, at least two of the goaltenders, will be for Team USA, right? Hellebuyck, Ottinger, Demko. Jeremy Swayman, I'm not sure, how close, he would be. And that's why I want to ask you about kind of who you would expect to be the starting goaltenders for the U.S. and Canada. Canada, I told Dave kind of like my list, and I realize my list really means nothing. But I think Adin Hill has to be on that list. And are Carter Hart and Jordan Binnington not also, the front runners? I'm not sure. I think you maybe have to throw in Darcy Kemper in there. But I guess, who do you think right now are the top? I'm putting you on the spot, but who are the top three goaltenders for each country? And also kind of what does it say about the state of goaltending when, to me, at least clearly the U.S. has a big advantage in goal right now at that level?
Yeah, no, the Americans have been doing a great job with they call it their 51 and 30 program, the goal of the program, their goalie coaching program, which brings in, coaches and elite level goalies every summer and gets them together, sort of like a think tank thing, and make sure the young guys have mentors in the established guys, and make sure that coaches are progressing and they've got more coaching at the youth level. Like, they've done a really nice job with that program. And of course, 51 and 30, for those that have never heard it, means the goal of the program is to have 51% of the minutes played in the National Hockey League with an American flag next to them, like American goalies playing 51%. It's an ambitious goal of NHL minutes by the year 2030. And man, when I look at the top of the list in terms of goals saved above expected, even got the old timer in there and Jonathan Quick, who's nice bounce back with the Rangers that I didn't see coming, frankly. I thought that was a decision based on his numbers the past couple of years that might hurt the Rangers, but he's playing controlled and contained and within the edges of his crease, like rarely past heels out, and he looks great. You mentioned Demko. Charlie Lindgren's got a plus 5.7 adjusted save percentage right now. Jeremy Swayman, obviously Connor Hellebuyck, Jake Ottinger. Like, there's no shortage of good choices for the Americans right now. And you're right, it gets a little tougher. Binnington's on my list. I'd be curious to see what the brain trust, that's the other thing, right? It's 2023 and that's in 2025.
Sure.
And a lot can change. Like, who would have had Jeremy Swayman, coming almost straight out of college and into the NHL and having this success and being on that radar this quickly a couple of years ago. And so a lot can change in a couple of years, but on the Canadian side, yeah, it's a little tougher, right? Like, there's not as many guys at the top of that list. And the one guy who there's been consistency issues, but he plays behind a team that gives up so much, and yet consistently, well, I shouldn't say consistently because there have been swings, but he's back up there right now. And he's had long stretches where he's been well above expected save percentage, is Binnington. And I'd be curious to see what the Brain Trust thinks about, some of the other elements that come with Jordan as your goalie, especially on an international stage. We've sort of seen the near fights and things like that. I think you'd expect them to maybe rein that in. Adin Hill was exceptional in the playoffs, and in the right structure and right system where his system of play, that inside out, Benoit Allaire, Sean Burke mentality works. Yeah, he'd be on my list as well. Like, it's Darcy Kemper's had last year wasn't terrible, but he's having a tough start this year. Like, where is he a year from now? Carter Hart's been pretty good this year in Philadelphia, but big ask there in terms of a team that's not ready to compete. There's
one other guy. Sorry, I was going to throw is Devin Levi. A couple of years from now, once his game has matured, is he not also in that conversation? Right.
I would think Devin would be in that conversation. Other guy, like, think about it this way in terms of how fast things change. Adin Hill's in the conversation now. He wasn't last year. 2.5 years ago. When was the last time we were talking Olympics? Time is a flat circle since the pandemic. I can't remember. But the last time we had an Olympic conversation, one of the guys that was being mentioned as part of that young group coming up was Mackenzie Blackwood. Mm-hmm. Like, there's still plenty of time for Mackenzie Blackwood, who has all the physical tools and size in the world, to put himself on that list. So there's potential there, but certainly it's a lot less certain than what the Americans have right now, or what the Swedes have right now, or what the Russians have right now. And I'm not saying it's time for a conference and figure out what's going on with goaltending in Canada. Like, we're not at that degree. But yeah, like, the guys behind me on the wall, Price and Luongo, are gone, right? So who's next? Marc-Andre Fleury's going to be pushing 40 by then. Probably not an option. So, there's a lot of countries that have a lot more options in net than Canada does. Doesn't mean Canada can't still get it done with what they have, but boy, you'd like to see that list be a little bit flipped, especially with the Americans.
Kevin, you mentioned size, so I'm going to ask you a size question. I was looking at, Thomas Milic, the Jets 2023 fifth rounder, of course, reigning WHL goalie of the year with Seattle, took them, did some things in the Memorial Cup, of course, in your neck of the woods. So when you think of he's a 6-foot goaltender here in Winnipeg. Obviously, we've been watching Connor Hellebuyck, 6'4", and it's funny because when I did a search on shorter goalies in the NHL, I found a Kevin Woodley article from 2018 saying shorter goalies find niche in what has become a big man's position. So how hard is it for a guy who is, 6 feet to be able to get that level? We saw again, Milic went down to the ECHL, started with Norfolk, picked up his first shutout, was player of the week, went to the AHL, got his first win last night in Belleville. He's definitely a battler, but what does a goalie like that have to do to get to that next level to become an NHL regular?
Just be better than everyone else. And that's the reality. Cause no, like, listen, like there's a perfect size, right? Like, and I've had different goalie coaches, theorize on this. It might be around 6'3". Some think it might be as small as 6'2". There's an ideal size. And whether it's, let's pick 6'3". If that's your perfect size goaltender, then goaltenders on either end of that spectrum have to overcome their size. 6'5", 6'6", bigger holes, not as fast laterally. 6'1", 6'2", you don't take up as much space, but you're probably going to be quicker. Footwork, edge control, watch UC Saros play, and again, a little bit of a struggle this season, but for the last 2 years, he's been one of the best goalies in the National Hockey League. Frankly, it's absurd he wasn't a Vezina Trophy finalist last year. He is the only one whose numbers came anywhere near. Well, at least Gustafsson was there too, but in a much smaller sample. But Saros was the only one that had a legitimate case behind Linus Ullmark. He's been really good for a lot of years. Dustin Wolf is a 2-time American Hockey League goalie of the year in his first 2 years of pro. The game is incredibly quick east-west. Teams are creating dynamic lateral offense. You have to be able to skate in today's game. And so, 6'3", if you can skate in your 6'3", that's better than being 6 foot and skate. But it's all about movement, movement, crease presence, edge control, the ability to get around that crease, get set, get square before the shot. And you have to have battle and you have to have all those other elements, regardless of what size goaltender you are. But you can succeed at that height. It's just harder because even though there might be an ideal size and there's challenges on either side of that spectrum, the kid who's 6'6" is going to get every opportunity for his size to fail. And the kid who's 6 foot is going to get a lot fewer. Like, his failures will be seen differently and he will not get as many opportunities. It's too bad because, look at, it's only in recent last couple of years that we had like a Vezina Trophy. Like, you had to go back to Dryden to find a Vezina Trophy winner above 6'4" until the last 3 or 4 years. Same with a cup winner. up until Vasilevsky and now Aiden Hill, right? Like we obsess with it. Obviously, it's better to fill more space, but smaller goalies can succeed in part because they have such little margin for error coming up through the ranks. They skate better, they move better. And that's increasingly becoming what you need out of a goaltender at the NHL level. So I think the window's open. It's just a matter of, Thomas Milic is a guy who some teams won't even look at because of his size. And good for the Jets for looking past that. Now it's up to him to prove that they were right. There's certainly no shortage of recent examples of young goalies that are showing they're capable of overcoming it. I think Devin Levi will show he's capable at the NHL level with more time. I think Dustin Wolf will do the same. And I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Milic, with what he's done at the other levels with that size, follows in their footsteps. Maybe not to the same degree, but showing that they're able to be NHL goaltenders.
Kevin Woodley covers the Vancouver Canucks for NHL.com. He covers goaltending for In Goal Magazine. Big friend of ours here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Kevin, thanks so much for this morning. Have a great rest of your Saturday. Really appreciate your time and insight.
Off to the rink for Canucks Kraken today, boys. So it's a good day. It's sunny on the West Coast and there's hockey on. It's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing. The decade of darkness is over. The sunshine bright on
that
the
was
West
also
Coast.
the tentative title of the story of Illegal Curve, by the way. Decade of Darkness.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care, buddy.
Have a good one.
Cheers,
guys.
Kevin.
There he goes. Kevin
wasn't even touching that one. He's like, you know what?
Yeah.
Not gonna say
Discretion
anything.
is the better part of valor is what that is an example of right there. Courtesy of our buddy Ken Wiebe, this from Jets head coach or Jets associate coach Scott Arniel. Dominic Toninato is an option to play tonight. He's here as a precaution. Arniel isn't sure if he's going to make any changes on defense yet for tonight's game versus the Coyotes. So question marks abound for the Winnipeg Jets on both the back end and up front. But we know that Laurent Brossoit will get the start against Karel Vejmelka, and game time is shortly after 6 p.m. with the post-game show coming your way at 8:45. We also don't know who's going to be joining Dave M. Maybe nobody. Maybe it's the Dave Minuk experience tonight.
I might just skip it.
It's just going to be a blank screen. That's just it. There's no post game, something like that. We'll just see. But somebody will be here at 8:45 to talk about the Jets and the Coyotes. That'll happen later on tonight, and we look forward to all of you joining us back here for that. Other news coming out of Boston: Milan Lucic was arrested earlier today for a domestic incident. He's taking a leave of absence from the Boston Bruins, an indefinite leave of absence following his arrest earlier today. So obviously we hope that situation gets resolved and Milan Lucic gets whatever sort of help he needs if he's in need of some help. We obviously don't want that situation to continue to escalate along those lines.
I think we have a couple of co-hosts now, Drew. Spency and Kenny's Water Bottle.
There you go. I think it's a great show. I can't see any problems with that idea whatsoever. I think it's going to be smooth sailing if that's
By the way, it will be coming to you live from the hot tub.
There you go. Live from the hot tub. It's the Minuk, Spency, and Water
Sage
Bottle
Creek.
show. What a beautiful show that'll be. Big thanks to all of our sponsors. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Farmery Beer, home of Illegal Curve Lager, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and of course the Rink Guys support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks to all of you for joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Yes, as Bailey's mom Amy says, please have a safe weekend. Please don't drink/smoke and drive. Absolutely right. No excuse for doing that ever. A phone, you can save a life by making a phone call or calling a ride for a ride, a cab or an Uber or whatever it might be. Be safe out there, folks. We know it's going to be a fun weekend. Go Bombers tomorrow night, the Grey Cup. We know we're cheering him on as he's made his prediction. God help us all if that comes true. But
Go enjoy the weather until the post-game show, until the Jets game. It's +6 out today. So
get outside, get outside, enjoy your day, whatever you got planned. We'll be back later on tonight for the Illegal Curve post-game show. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow @Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.